Welcome in, everyone, to a new edition with our good friends over here at Service Talk. I am your host, Blake Ruffino. Welcome in to Are You Serious Sports? LSU football camp is a week away, and I am really looking forward into it. We got lots to discuss in this special episode here today. Before we get to that, bringing up our good friends over at Service Talk Digital Media. Go over to servicehawk.io today for all of your marketing needs. You're an HVAC, electrical pro, generator pro. Go use them today. Just talk to our good friends Justin and Lee. They do an exceptional job, and they do soar above the competition. If you're in the 985-225-504, you're in business, you own your own business, you need to reach out to them today. Let them fix your SEO problems that you are having today as well. Justin and Lee are doing an exceptional job up here in Hammond, Louisiana. I love every time that we come up here, we have a great time and having good conversations with a lot of great people. But in this special episode, we do got a lot that we have to talk about. We are a week away from LSU fall football camp. Credentials are applied for. We will be out there next week and breaking down and watching LSU practice. Last night on the live episode, there were a couple of things that we discussed. Three big things that we discussed here last night that I kind of want to dive in on. And every time that we come to Service Talk, we do these special episodes, we talk about topics on the live shows in a broader scale, in a 35,000 foot overview scale. I like when we do these because when we come in here, we can have more of a intimate conversation in reference to the things that we need to discuss at a bigger level, like what we did last week. I wanted to start off tonight's episode or today's special episode talking about the three main points of what we're going to need to see and what we're going to see next week from LSU football as camp starts. Last night we had a conversation about the three things that when the gate opens up that I want to go and see. We talked about looking and watching the offensive line. We talked about how are they going to formulate this. Now, I'm sure practice 1, practice 2 is going to be much different when we're down the road and the season's getting very near. Is Josh Thompson going to be at guard? Is he going to be at tackle? What do you do with Braylon Moore, DJ Chester? All of those things. But I wanted to dive in a little bit more on the offensive line and the run game. I don't think that LSU football can have another season like they did last year without an effective run game. Guys, last year, LSU was 108th in the country in rushing offense. They had a total average per game of 116.4 yards per game in that stretch. In that stretch of games last season, there were a couple of games at the end of the year where LSU did a much better job of being able to run the football when LSU head coach Brian Kelly got involved. The interesting tidbit that we brought up last night that I want to focus in on is, guys, I think there's a couple of things here that we need to understand. Number one, just getting around mentally of how bad the run game was in big game situations and how much better it needs to get to in these big game situations from a season ago. You know, what's interesting about having this conversation is we think of the Brian Kelly era. We think of how bad the defense was in 2023, how bad the secondary was in 2023, and how much better they needed to get. You know, they did last year under Corey Raymond and Blake Baker. We're hoping that they take another step forward again this year as they got better last year. Let's see if Baker and company and Olsen and company can do that. But I think number one for me is understanding how bad it was and how better it needs to be for you to be a playoff team. Think about this. In 2023, LSU secondary was 107th, 108th in the country in passing yards allowed. The conversations going around Jaden Daniels, the conversations going around LSU, the conversations that we all had was when Blake Baker came in and after Jaden Daniels and company are exiting the building was, listen, the whole staff got fired. You got to be better in your secondary, which they were a season ago. But now you go into last season in 2024, and we look at the things that LSU did. We look at the improvements that they had defensively from a statistical analysis standpoint in the secondary, in run defense, and sacks, and havoc rate, and tackles for loss. From 2023 to 2024, they 1,000% got better in every single area besides turnovers, and generating turnovers, ironically, was about the same. But I do look at one area, and when we're talking about the LSU run game, I just don't think that LSU can survive another year and get where they want to go unless this offensive line produces the way that they need to produce in the run game to take that next step forward. Look, you were 8-4 a season ago. You probably shouldn't have walked out of a game and a win against South Carolina, but you're able to pull off a game against Ole Miss. Games are games and situations are situations. But when I look at those certain games, you clip South Carolina because Caden Durham's biggest game from a statistical analysis standpoint and just overall standpoint, actually in the big games, whether it be Ole Miss, whether it be Texas A&M, whether it be Alabama, etc., came against South Carolina. And ironically, that was before he was hurt. So if he comes back to full health, would that produce better in the run game when you have a back that is fully healthy? That's something that we need to monitor. But I do think it's interesting when we talk about in 2023 how bad the secondary was, and we look at 2024, guys, there's been one area under Brian Kelly that's really plagued you the last 3 seasons. Doesn't matter what side of the ball it's on. Doesn't matter what happened. Guys, when you're 108th in the country in rushing, you're 108th in the country in pass defense, you can't do that in the SEC and expect to get where you want to go. I look at the situation with the run game, and when camp opens up a week from today, I talked about this last night, but I think the number one thing that we have to monitor through the entire camp is how this offensive line is producing. I know that when we talk about the offensive line, and especially when we go into situations where we come into live shows or we come on here and we talk about things, the offensive line doesn't make sales, right? Like we could clip something, I could clip something and put it on social media, and I say, hey, this offensive line's doing X, Y, or Z. It's not the thing that generates the most buzz, but I do think it's the most important thing going into this offseason and going into fall camp that we have to monitor. Guys, I look at a lot of different areas that statistically, offensively, that you were a year ago. I look at third down offense. And in that third down offense, you were 6th in the country offensively a year ago in success rate. You completed 49.5% of your third down situations. Most of those coming in situations in third and long plus that Garrett had to make something happen. You were really good on third down, even without a running game. The question becomes is if you give Garrett more help in that running game based off of what we saw a year ago, can you and will you be better on critical downs and critical situations? You know, third down has been something that I think that has plagued this team under Brian Kelly for a while, whether it be offense or defense. For example, you were in the hundreds in 2023 in third down conversion rate. You gave up way too many first downs on third and long situations. It was the thing that we talked about going into last offseason was, listen, man, you gave up way, way, way too many third down conversions on third and long situations. Ironically, the offense for you a season ago was really successful in completing these third down situations. LSU had 187 third down attempts last season. They converted 92 of them. Very efficient in what they did without a running game. Guys, how much better can this offense be, even with the surrounding weaponry that Garrett has, if you're able to take a step forward? Now, the question becomes, and the question that we'll talk about all throughout camp is, you have 4 offensive linemen that you have to replace. Is Josh Thompson better than Garrett Dellinger at guard? Is he better than Emory Jones, which I don't believe that he is, if he does get moved to right tackle? Is Braylon Moore going to be better at center than what DJ Chester was a year ago? Brian Kelly is pretty adamant about moving DJ Chester to right guard or guard in general. How does that work out for him at a position that, quite honestly, you're going to have someone lined up in front of you majority of the time? When you're at center, you don't. I think that there are a lot of different things that we got to look. And by the way, you're replacing a left tackle in Will Campbell, who's the first offensive lineman selected in last year's NFL draft. I think it's just by far the most important thing that we discuss this offseason. It goes by the wayside. It's something that we don't discuss often. The run game and the offensive line It's not something sexy to talk about. But I even think that there are things that LSU's got to do too to be able to do extensions of the running game to help out Garrett, even if you're not having the success in the run game from just lining up and running the football. Let me explain. I thought last year when LSU got in certain situations on critical third and shorts, they were way too predictable from a third down play calling standpoint. I think of really good offensive play callers in the game today. I think of Steve Sarkisian at Texas. I think of Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. You can name all of them. I think of Steve Sarkisian and the game that they had last year against Ohio State when Texas just simply could not run the football. They could not line up and get 3 yards on a critical third down. So what did Sark do? You know what? If I can't run the ball, this is what we're going to do. We're going to throw the ball to the back out of the backfield. We're going to do some bubble screens. We're going to generate and do things that are extension of the running game to get our playmakers out in space on the outside so that you have to make a play, and we think that we have better athletes than you do. In that instance, I think that LSU, from a play calling standpoint, even if you have struggles early in the run game, you do have guys like Harlan Berry that you can utilize. What can Caden Durham do when fully healthy? What does Caleb Jackson give you in some critical situations? Guys, it's the number one talking point. And I think that Sloan has got to be better in the play calling situations. Does Alex Atkins' emergence here help him being the offensive coordinator at Florida State and that whole staff being let go, now being here at LSU as the tight ends coach? How much of a say does he have in this running game? And does Joe Sloan relinquish any of those play calling duties? Or does he say, this is my duty, this is what I do? I don't know how all of that is going to work. Now, Brian Kelly said during the spring period that Alex Atkins is going to have a lot of say in some of the things that we do in the running game. I don't personally think in the run game portion of LSU's offense that Brian Kelly can walk back allowing Joe Sloan to not have help in the run game when literally at the end of the season last year he had to be so massively involved in it. Guys, you were one of the best teams in the country last year on third down. And even in those conversions, you did not have a functioning running game that can help out your quarterback. I'm not asking LSU to go from 108 in the country to a top 20 team offensively in the run game. What I'm just simply asking for is, can you get in the 50s? Can you get in the 60s? Because I do think that if you get there and you're moderately average, if you're middle of the pack, how much more does that elevate Garrett? How much more does that elevate this receiving core when you don't know what's coming? How many more explosive plays can you get on teams with the speed that you have outside to be able, and you're going to have to force them to be in the box on these third and short critical situations where they can take a shot deep and utilize the speed from Barry and Brown, Aaron Anderson, Chris Hilton, etc. Those little things always dictate the games. Guys, last year as an example, I think of Ole Miss. Guys, they would keep 5 guys in the box and they dared you to run the football and you still couldn't do it. Their defensive line dominated you from the first snap to the last snap, and there wasn't much that you can do about it. Same against Texas A&M. Same against, in certain situations, specifically with Alabama. Same with Florida when it mattered. Those current situations are so critical for you taking the next step. So as we're a week out, as we are looking into this team offensively, there's no bigger area than the offensive line. If you do not do good things and you can't be moderately average in the run game, guys, I don't know if you can make the playoff. I don't know if you'll be good enough and Garrett can get away enough. And I don't know if play calling enough that you've shown enough that you're going to be able to overcome that. Now, great offensive coordinators find ways to continue to move the football in critical situations, even when something is taken away from them. You know, I talked about that Texas and Ohio State game earlier. Guys, Jeremiah Smith was double teamed by Texas the entire game. Didn't stop Ohio State from moving the football. They could not run the ball with Juckins. They couldn't run the ball with Henderson, and they throw Henderson a screen out in the back, out of the backfield, and it goes to the house. Great play callers, and that was Chip Kelly. Great play callers are not just going to continue to ram their heads up against the wall. And even some of the philosophy and schematic stuff, I just did not agree with. So the biggest question for me, and the probably the thing that I am monitoring the most a week out going into fall camp, what does your offensive line look like from a personnel standpoint? How are they holding up, especially at tackle? And I shouldn't even say especially at tackle, just overall, even in the interior, I thought there were some bad things that happened there during spring. How are you moving the football? What does that look like when you go into these team periods? And then really number 3 along the offensive line, what is your lineup? Because guys, there's no pitter-pattering here. And my meemaw would love me saying pitter-pattering, but there's no wasting time here. I felt like in the spring, you were playing a lot of portal politics with this offensive line, not bringing in Josh Thompson, not giving him a lot of first-team reps. You're one of the guys that have been there to get those reps. I think of Braylon Moore not getting a lot of first-team reps as well. I think of Carius Kern not getting a lot of reps with the first team. I felt like you were playing portal politics the entire time. And in those portal politics, you didn't want guys to leave your team after the spring portal window closed because you needed the depth in case of injury. So you played those guys that had been here and gave them hope that they could start. There is no portal period right now. You have to find your best 5 unit. I don't care what it is. You could put anybody at center. You could put anybody at guard. I don't care who it is. It doesn't matter who it is. They got to find their best 5 unit, and I hope it comes quickly. I hope it comes swift. And, guys, I hope a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, the conversation that we're having about this offensive line and run game is completely different. But if there is any other storyline other than that one, I would be hard-pressed to find which ones they are. One other thing before we get out of here that I want to mention that I think is very critical for me, and I talked about this too, but I want to elaborate on it. Guys, I do think that you're going to have and be a lot more successful in your secondary defensively. I think that LSU's secondary and what they did in the portal a year ago, or I say a year ago, 6 months ago in January, what they did in the portal and going and getting Mansour Delane, going through the spring portal period and getting guys like A.J. Halsey, bringing in a guy that's a 5-star, the number 1 corner in the country, and DJ Pickett, Jackson, et cetera, and then bringing back guys that have been on your roster like Ashton Stamps, P.J. Woodland, Michael Turner. I do think that Deshaun Spears, I think that the talent level in the secondary this year versus what we saw in 2024 and in 2023 from an overall talent perspective is by far much better than the last 2 seasons. In 2022, I felt like you had a lot of experience and a lot of talent with Jay Ward, Jared Bernard-Converse, Mekhi Garner. Those guys had played a lot of football. And quite honestly, in games like Alabama that essentially won you the SEC West, guys like Jared Bernard-Converse came up big with the interception against Bryce Young in the end zone. Mekhi Garner getting a massive tackle and stop on 3rd down that forced Bama to kick, and they're not able to continue to put that drive together, and they're not able to go down the field and score. I think of Jay Ward having the massive interception against Mississippi State and the massive tackle that he had against Alabama to force you into certain situations where that secondary was by far under Brian Kelly the best. I think of Joe Fouché, who didn't even start, just got sparing playing time, having the massive interception that he did against Ole Miss that really turned the tide for you there. Guys, I think this secondary is very talented. But my question for the secondary is not if this might be the most talented secondary that you've had in these last 4 years. My question is who's going to be out there? They rotated so much in that secondary with guys like Cooley running in, who you got from the portal. You had and was in the slot and at safety. You have DJ Pickett that was rolling in there, Mansour Delane, Ashton Stamps, Jakeem Jackson. So many different variables of now when we get into fall camp and you're in week 2, week 3, hey, who are the guys that are out there that are starting for you? Did Deshaun Spears have a good enough spring? Did he have a good enough summer where he takes that next step as a top 50 guy that you recruited him as? Does he beat out a guy like Jordan Gilbert, who, quite honestly, guys, last season had a very, very bad season? The question, again, for me is not how talented they can be. The question will be is who's going to be your starting 5, who's going to be your starting 6, who's going to be in that rotation of DBs that can be able to go out there and be better for you. Now, I look at the secondary a year ago, and I think of some of the games, and statistically, and even in some of the games, teams did not throw on you as much because defensively, well, let's just call it what it is. You got pushed around. Teams were doing quarterback veer and quarterback runs on you all the time. It wasn't pretty, but teams didn't throw on you. But then you got games like Baylor. You have games like Ole Miss to some extent. You have games like A&M to some extent where, man, your secondary really underperformed. Well, they really underperformed in the run game and helping out in the run game. But I look at LSU a season ago. They definitely got better from a statistical standpoint. They got better in the sense of they were 108 a season ago. Last year, they were 76. They gave up 224 yards per game in the air. That can't happen either. That unit's got to take a massive step forward, and especially at safety. Guys, I said all that to say this. I think that, for me, I don't think that your safety room can be any worse than what it was a year ago. I really don't. I'm sure that there's a world. I'm sure that there's a situation where it can be. But the last 2 seasons at safety, you have been god-awful. And when you have a unit that is supposed to be the last line of defense, when you have a room that would run away from tackles, miss tackles, was not good in coverage, for me, I don't know how you don't take a step forward. I don't know if you can be middle of the pack in the secondary. I don't know any of those things. I feel like you're better at your worst position or one of your worst positions from a season ago, that being safety. Safety and defensive tackle, linebacker, I guess you can even say, is where LSU has got to be better. The interior of that defense has got to be better. So I know we all want to know how Garrett and the wide receivers are doing. I know we want to see how the edge players are doing along with the defensive tackles. But guys, quite honestly, for me, I think the biggest 2 storylines coming out of LSU right now, going into fall camp a week away, what is this offensive line going to be and what are they going to do? And guys, who in the hell is going to line up in your secondary? I think for the secondary, we have a pretty good idea of those guys that will be there, but we still have that for the offensive line. I think we all know that Tyree Adams will be there. We all know that Mansour Delane will be at either the slot. Maybe they move him at safety in some situations. Maybe he's on the boundary. You know that he's going to be there. What do you do with Ashton Stamps? What do you do with DJ Chester? Those are the 2 biggest storylines for me as we go in from a week away. And so I will say this. I am very excited. It is now that time of year, the last week without really talking football and things that are going on. All right, we're here with our good friends over at ServiceHawk Digital Media. Get in touch with them today at servicehawk.io. Get in touch with Justin. Get in touch with Lee. Let them solve all of your marketing issues. Until tonight, we'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one. Peace. And by the way, Leah from